4 juices, 4 sets of clinical trials, and 4 very specific things they've been shown to do for people over 65. Not general wellness, not vague antioxidant benefits, specific, measurable outcomes, tested in older adults, published in peer-reviewed journals, the kind of research that holds up when you actually look at it. We're talking about memory recall, eye health, sleep quality, brain blood flow. These are the things that quietly start shifting after 65, and these are the compounds the research keeps pointing back to. Here's how this video goes. I'm going to walk you through all 4 juices and tell you exactly what the research found. No overclaiming. I'll tell you what the studies actually showed, what the limitations are, and what a realistic expectation looks like. And I'll tell you which one has a mechanism most people have completely wrong. Juice 1 is blueberry, juice 2 is tart cherry, juice 3 is pomegranate, and juice 4 is going to surprise some of you because it's not a fruit at all. Let's start with the one that has the most clinical data behind it, blueberry juice. This is the one with the deepest research trail specifically in older adults, and the findings are worth understanding in detail because they tell you something important about what helping memory actually means. A research group out of the University of Cincinnati took a sample of older adults with early memory changes, people who were noticing things slipping, not dramatic decline, just the kind of subtle word finding and recall issues that start showing up in your 60s and 70s. They gave one group wild blueberry juice daily for 12 weeks. The other group got a placebo. At the end of 12 weeks, improved paired associate learning, improved word list recall, both results statistically significant. That's one study and a small sample, 9 people, worth noting, but it wasn't an isolated finding. A more recent meta-analysis pooled the results of 9 separate randomized controlled trials involving 513 patients. The conclusion? Blueberry intake in older adults with mild cognitive impairment showed significant improvement in episodic memory, the kind of memory that lets you recall what happened, what someone told you, where you put something. The effect was modest, but real and consistent across multiple studies, and a double-blind trial out of the UK followed 61 healthy adults aged 65 to 80 for 12 weeks. Daily wild blueberry polyphenols versus a matched placebo. The blueberry group showed measurable improvements in both cognitive performance and vascular function compared to placebo. 3 different research teams, same direction of findings. That consistency matters more than any single result. Now, why does blueberry juice do this? And this is the part worth understanding, because it's not what most people assume. It's not about vitamins, it's not vitamin C or a general antioxidant effect. The active compounds are called anthocyanins, the pigments that make blueberries dark blue. They've been found to cross into the brain itself, past the membrane that controls what gets from the bloodstream into the brain, and they show up specifically in the memory and learning centers, the regions most involved in storing what you experienced yesterday and retrieving it tomorrow, and the mechanism researchers believe is most important. Anthocyanins appear to increase blood flow to the brain, specifically to areas that tend to get less supply as we age, regions where blood flow gradually decreases over decades, quietly affecting how quickly we process information and how well we lay down new memories. Think of it this way. Your brain runs on blood flow the way a city runs on electricity. As the supply decreases to certain neighborhoods, the ones responsible for memory, for processing speed, for word retrieval, those neighborhoods start going dim. Not dark, just dimmer, slower, a little harder to reach. What the anthocyanin research suggests is that these compounds may help restore some of that supply to exactly the areas that need it most. That's not a cure, that's not reversal. But it's a meaningful mechanism, and it's the reason this particular juice keeps showing up in the clinical literature on cognitive aging. Practical note, The studies used amounts roughly equivalent to a cup of fresh blueberries daily, either as juice or powder. Whole blueberries work. The juice concentrates the compounds, but adds sugar. If you're managing blood sugar, that's worth factoring in. Tart cherry juice. And this one I want you to pay close attention to, because most people who've heard of tart cherry juice think of it as a sports recovery drink, something athletes use for sore muscles after training. That's real, that's legitimate. But for people over 65, that's not actually the most important thing it does. The most important thing tart cherry juice does for older adults is sleep. And I don't mean that in a vague, general sense. I mean clinical trials have measured it with sleep monitors, brainwave recordings, and validated questionnaires, and found specific, significant improvements in older adults with insomnia. A University of Delaware study took 34 adults between ages 65 and 80 and randomized them to either 16 ounces of Montmorency tart cherry juice daily, split between morning and evening, or a matched placebo drink. 12 weeks. And the cherry juice group showed meaningfully improved scores on both memory tests and cognitive performance assessments. But the sleep finding is what makes the mechanism click. A separate randomized crossover study gave adults either tart cherry juice concentrate or a placebo for 7 days, then switched them. Measuring actual melatonin output. The result: tart cherry juice significantly increased urinary melatonin levels, not by a small margin, and sleep duration and quality improved with it. A meta-analysis published in 2023 looked across multiple cherry juice sleep trials and found that the cherry juice group had significantly higher sleep efficiency than placebo, effect size of 0.63, which puts it in the moderate to strong range, and objective total sleep time increased significantly, the kind of result that holds up under statistical scrutiny. The reason this works is that tart cherries are one of the only whole foods with naturally occurring melatonin in meaningful concentrations. Your body makes melatonin to regulate the sleep-wake cycle, but melatonin production declines with age, often substantially by the time you're in your late 60s and 70s. That's part of why sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, harder to maintain as we get older. The cherry juice is essentially providing a small, food-based top-up to a system that's been gradually running lower. Now, I want to stop here for a moment because this is where the stakes get real. Most people think of poor sleep in their 60s and 70s as annoying, an inconvenience, something you adapt to. You go to bed earlier, you nap, you manage. But poor sleep isn't just uncomfortable. It's the primary window during which your brain clears metabolic waste, including the proteins associated with cognitive decline. There's a system in the brain that only becomes fully active during deep sleep. It acts like a drainage system, flushing out the byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. When sleep is fragmented or too shallow, that clearance process doesn't complete. Every night of poor sleep is a night that clearance doesn't fully happen. Think about what that looks like across a decade. Someone who's been waking at 3 a.m. for 10 years, getting up tired, pushing through the afternoon fog, cancelling the morning walk because they just don't have it, sitting at dinner with their family and struggling to hold the thread of the conversation. Not in crisis, just dimmer, just slower, assuming that's aging, assuming nothing can be done. And the intervention isn't dramatic. It's a glass of juice in the morning and another at night. That's it. And the research says it moves the needle. The effect size is comparable to valerian, by the way, the most widely studied natural supplement for sleep. Most people have heard of valerian. Almost nobody talks about tart cherry juice. That gap makes no sense to me. Practical note. The studies used Montmorency variety specifically. That's the sour, dark red tart cherry, not sweet cherries. The concentrate form works. Aim for roughly 2 cups daily, split morning and evening, consistent with how the trials were run. Juice 3, pomegranate. This one sits in an interesting position in the research. The evidence is real, but it's specifically about memory stabilization over time, not rapid improvement. That distinction matters, and I'll explain why. A 12-month randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial enrolled 261 adults between ages 50 and 75. One group drank 8 ounces of pomegranate juice daily. The other drank a matched placebo for a full year. The finding: daily pomegranate juice consumption was associated with stabilizing the ability to learn visual information over that 12-month period. Not a dramatic jump in scores, stabilization. And you might hear that and think, that's underwhelming, but here's why it isn't. Most cognitive aging research is looking at the wrong thing when it only measures improvement. Because the reality of how the brain changes after 65 is that things don't tend to dramatically improve. What you're actually fighting is the rate of decline. You're trying to hold the line, keep things where they are for longer than they would have been otherwise. A study that shows stabilization over 12 months, where the control group declined and the treatment group didn't, is showing you exactly that. It's showing you the intervention working. It's just working quietly, the way most genuinely useful things do. The mechanism here is similar to blueberry in one way, polyphenols affecting blood flow and oxidative stress. But pomegranate has its own distinct compounds that produce anti-inflammatory molecules in the gut, which have their own neuroprotective effects. Different path, same general destination. Practical note: commercial pomegranate juice is widely available and mostly consistent in its polyphenol content. 8 ounces a day is what the trial used. Watch the sugar content. Like all fruit juices, the calories add up. Juice 4. And this one surprises people every time. It's green juice, specifically kale and spinach based. I know, not what you expected. But stay with this for a second, because the eye health data here is some of the strongest nutritional evidence I've come across. Harvard researchers followed over 100,000 people, nurses and health professionals, for up to 24 years. They tracked diet, tracked outcomes, and looked at who developed advanced age-related macular degeneration. AMD is the leading cause of legal blindness in older Americans. Not cataracts, not glaucoma, AMD, and the people in the top fifth for lutein and zeaxanthin intake, the compounds concentrated almost exclusively in dark, leafy greens, had about 40% lower risk of advanced macular degeneration than the people in the bottom fifth. 40%, over 100,000 people, nearly a quarter century of follow-up. That's 2 large independent studies, combined, followed for decades, and then the NIH confirmed it from a different angle. The AREDS-2 trial, funded by the National Eye Institute, 4,203 participants, 10 years of data, found that lutein and zeaxanthin supplementation reduced the risk of AMD progression by about 26% compared to the previous formula. This is why your ophthalmologist may have mentioned leafy greens in the context of eye health. The research behind it is unusually solid for nutritional science. And here's what makes the green juice angle so useful. Kale contains about 39 milligrams of lutein per 100 grams. Spinach, about 12. These are the highest dietary concentrations available. A glass of fresh kale and spinach juice gets you more lutein in one serving than most people consume in a week of normal eating. I had a patient in her early 70s, sharp, active, no significant health issues, who came in after her eye doctor flagged early signs of macular changes. Nothing serious yet. But the word yet was sitting heavy with her. She'd heard about lutein, but assumed it was supplement territory, not food territory. When we talked through what the research actually showed about dietary sources versus pills and how much you could realistically get from a daily green juice, something shifted for her. She started it that week. 6 months later, at her follow-up, her ophthalmologist noted her macular pigment density, the actual protective layer in the retina built from lutein, had measurably increased. That's the mechanism working, not dramatic, not a cure, but the retina doing what it does when it has the raw material it needs. Practical note, lutein from cooked greens is more absorbable than raw. Heat releases it from the plant cell walls. Blending or juicing and then briefly heating or adding a small amount of healthy fat to the juice significantly increases how much your body actually takes in. Worth knowing. Which leads to the practical question, do you have to drink all four? No. Start with the one that maps to your biggest concern. If sleep is the thing keeping you up, literally, start with tart cherry. If you've had an eye doctor mention early macular changes, start with the green juice. If memory is the thing you notice most, blueberry is where the clinical literature is deepest. And if you find one that works well for you and want to add another, there's no conflict between them. These aren't competing interventions. They're different tools for different systems. One more thing before I let you go, and this is actually the thing I find most encouraging about all of this. The research on these juices is almost entirely about prevention and maintenance, not rescue. The people in these trials weren't in crisis. They were people exactly like you, over 65, paying attention, wanting to do something genuinely useful for the next chapter of their health. That's who this research was designed for, and the fact that the answers sit in a grocery store, not a pharmacy, matters. There's something worth holding on to in that. You're asking the right questions, you're looking in the right places. Start with one. Be consistent for at least 12 weeks. That's the trial duration across most of this research. Pay attention to how you feel. Take good care of yourself. You've clearly already decided that's worth doing. If this was helpful, subscribe. There's more on nutrition, brain health, and what the research actually says coming up. See you in the next one.